Hey everybody, I'm Jammer. Welcome back to another Mario Kart 8 Deluxe video. Today we're going to be going over some of the best kart setups in the game. Quick thing to note, these setups are specific to 150cc and lower. Setups for battle mode and 200cc will be very different from these ones just because how those modes are played, a much more emphasis on different types of stats rather than here. If you're looking for setups for those modes, I will be posting videos on those in the next few days. So if they are out already, I'll put a link in the description or whatever. But if they aren't, please stay tuned for that. Now, this is also going to be assuming that you are somewhat adept at the game, because a lot of these setups do involve hindering some of the stats that are beneficial to newer players, such as like handling and traction and whatnot. So before we even get started, let's jump in and take a look at just the stats themselves and go over each one and what they mean. So speed, obviously, is the top speed your character can reach. So a character who would have 4 speed over a character who has 3 speed, the 3 speed character will be slower than the 4 speed character. The acceleration stat is basically how fast you can achieve your top speed. So a character, again, with 4 acceleration will achieve their top speed before a character with 3 acceleration. Unlike Mario Kart Wii U, I've said numerous times before, there is no acceleration tiers, while in that game used to be you have to land exactly at 4 to get 4, and if you're just under, it'll drop down to 3. Here you'll get that exact value. It is still important to aim for a pretty decent amount of acceleration just because when you are playing online or with other players, a lot of items do hit you, and the acceleration is important to help you get you back to your top speed as quick as possible after getting hit by an item, which happens. It is just a coincidence that a lot of my setups are at and around the same interval of acceleration, it's just how it wound up, but I think they worked out pretty well. The next stat is weight. Now the specific number for this isn't exactly important for building your stat, but a higher number is always preferred. So if you're running around with a character like Baby Luigi and a character like Bowser comes up next to you and runs into you, Baby Luigi will be sent flying, potentially even off the course, which can be very problematic for racing because that'll totally mess up and slow down your race. So it is important to have a pretty beefy weight stat. It's not like we're going to be statting for it necessarily, but it's good to have a higher amount rather than a lower amount. The next stat is handling. Now this is really important if you're a new beginner, like I mentioned. This just really helps you in navigating courses, turning, drifting, and cornering and everything like that. However, if you are adept or somewhat advanced at playing this game and know the courses very well, handling won't necessarily be the most important stat because you'll be able to, turn in advance and know when things are coming and initiate your drift sooner rather than later. It still can be pretty helpful just to get around those longer or tighter turns, The final stat is traction, by far probably going to be the most useless in this video particularly, because this is just how going off terrain or off the course itself affects your kart by dropping your speed and handling and whatnot. And this should never even happen to you anyways, especially at an advanced level of playing Mario Kart. So a lot of these setups completely disregard that stat entirely. Now it's very important, if you haven't seen my weight class video or my kart stat video, I'll put links to those in the description, card, whatever. You definitely need to watch those before here because I'll be referencing both charts numerous times throughout this video and making assumptions that you understand that knowledge as well. So you definitely have to check out those videos. Anyways, let's start getting into the kart setups themselves. Now I kind of separated these out into basically tiers of the top speed stat. So this one will be the 4.25 speed stat right here. Reason this is, I will admit there are probably better setups later in this video, but the reason this is still here is because of the massive boost to the handling at 3.75, by far the best handled kart in this entire video. I think it's still viable, especially for players who are, still getting used to the game, but are getting to a higher level and ready to get with beefier kart setup. I think this is a great setup because you got the awesome boost to your speed, still a massive 3 to your acceleration. Weight's awesome, and the handling really complements that. So basically the setup here is the Cat Cruiser, which is unique, Slim, which can be swapped out with the Crimson Slim, obviously. And you'll notice that all of these setups have the weight glider. This is not specific to the plain gliders. The only difference between that and the standard glider, you could use that here, but I personally think it's better to use a weight glider. You'll see the difference between the Wario and the standard. The big difference between these two is just you get a minus 2.5 to the traction, but a 2.5 boost to the weight, as you see here. And I think the boost is probably better to the weight and the traction. And like I said previously, traction really does not matter for these builds. So I think this is a pretty good setup for those beginning at the game, or for those who are just still getting used to the game, but are ready for something a little bit faster. Let's move into the 4.5 setup, using again the Cat Cruiser, Slim, and the Weight Glider, but this time using the Cruiser characters. So here you could use Donkey Kong, Waluigi, or Roy. This is very comparable to the setup before. It has 0.5 less weight and 0.25 less handling, but it does have that 0.25 boost to speed. It's really whatever is more important to you. I think the 0.25 boost to speed is worth it for the detriment to weight and handling, but that can be just up to you. The next setup in the 4.5 class is the almost heavy, so that's going to be a Wario or a Dry Bowser. The difference between these two and the previous one, this one actually has more acceleration by 0.25 and more weight, but less handling by 0.5. So that's why I put both of these here, because it does give some boosts to the acceleration and weight, which is really awesome. But if you aren't that experienced yet at the game and you still need help with the handling, the option of using the Cruiser class with the Cat and the Slim is definitely still usable. Because of that boost, of course, to the handling, and the weight isn't too big of a deal, and the 0.25 difference of acceleration isn't the biggest deal, it still is helpful, especially in comparison to other builds. Let's move on to the 4.75 side. Let's move on to the 4.75 speed stat. Now, basically everything's same across the board. The only difference is changing is the off-road tires that can also be switched out with the white off-road tires or the retro. This gets obviously the boost to its speed, keeps the acceleration a 3, which is still awesome and perfect. The weight gets a little bit of boost, but the handling does drop to 2.5. Again, if this is a big issue to you, then maybe it might make more sense to have less speed and get more handling. But I think this is definitely worth it for that boost to speed and keeping that perfect 3 acceleration, which you don't necessarily need. You could have a little bit less and still get away with it. But I think 3 acceleration is an awesome thing. That's why a lot of these builds have been shooting for that range. I think it's a about perfect range to kind of be able to recover from shells and whatnot and keep your placing within the race. It also doesn't detriment too much to your speed. The other good setup at the 4.5 speed is the, believe it or not, standard and then the weight glider. Again, keeping the same acceleration and speed. A little bit of a drop to the weight, but a boost to its handling, which I think is worth it, honestly, in the end. This would be probably the one I would run. The weight's important, don't get me wrong, but 0.25 won't make a difference, but 0.25 in handling just might. I'm not going to say this is the best one in the game. This is definitely one of my favorites of the ones I'm listing here, because you still got an awesome bulk of acceleration and your handling. Your speed is one of the fastest in the game, so I think it works out pretty well. Before we move on, there's 2 quick comparisons I could make for bike users. The Comet bike with the off-road and the weight glider is the exact same as the Cat and off-road and weight. The exact same stats. Obviously, the only difference is going to be the controlling of the drifting, with this having an inside drift, and just how the whole maneuverability of a bike versus a kart is. So if you're more used to kart setup, or if you're more of a bike user over a kart user, this would be the exact same as that one. Then as far as equal to the standard in weight, this kart here, the Duke with standard wheels and the weight glider, is the exact same across the board. Of course, like I mentioned previously, just giving a more of a control setup for bikes rather than karts. Now the last tier is the 5-speed tier, and I personally don't really recommend this just because of the fact that your acceleration is dropped down to 2.5. I mean, it really just depends. Is the 0.25 speed worth dropping your acceleration a whole half an interval? I mean, it's really up to you. Your handling is the same, your weight is increased, which is pretty awesome. But I think that a drop to acceleration will make a pretty big difference, more than it probably should. Like I said, it doesn't need to be a perfect 3 acceleration, but I still feel like this drop down to 2.5 might be a little bit too much of a hit just to reach that 5. But this is as far as I could find, this is the best build to try to get the 5 speeds as well as getting as high acceleration as possible. You could always drop down to maybe a parafoil glider. These guys give you a little bit of boosted acceleration, but I still feel like if you're going to go for the 5 speed, it makes more sense just to go through it this way. Now, this isn't a definitive list. There still are other good setups out there. And again, like I mentioned previously, it's not locked to just the standard kart. You could throw it in the Mercedes, for example, and you'll get the exact same setup and stats because their kart parts are exactly the same. But in the end, it really is just a matter of preference and what karts you like, what kind of controls you like. These are just some of my personal preference characters that I like to use. It really just depends on what kind of kart you like to race and what controls you're more used to. So really anything's viable. These minor tweaks in 0.25 boost to speed rather than a minus 0.25 deceleration, in the long run, aren't make or break for the race. Like a character who is running a speed at 4.25 or lower could still potentially beat me in a setup like this. It's not guaranteed that I'm going to be winning in using a setup like this. It really just depends, obviously, on the randomness of the items and how you go about driving the course especially. Even more important than these stats and everything, it really all comes down to how you race the course itself. If you take the fastest lines and don't slow down, manage your drifting and your boosts correctly. So don't think that you're going to just choose these setups and whatnot and you're going to get an instant win. But these are just some suggestions to get some of the best outputs for speed as well as still getting an awesome boost to your acceleration and handling. But yeah, let me guys know in the comments, what setups do you guys like to use in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for racing anyways? Do you try to maximize your certain stats or you just play a character that you like? Because honestly, that's all it really comes down to. If you like the character, there's always some sort of setup that could definitely make them at least able to compete with almost every other kart in the game. There obviously are some that are better than others, like the ones I'd mentioned here. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys race with. Give this video a big, awesome like. If you haven't already, subscribe for tons on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Nintendo Switch, and all that fun stuff. Later this week, or whenever, I plan on doing a video talking about the best kart setups for battling and the best kart setups for 200cc, because each mode has a very unique set of traits that you kind of would want in your setup. Like, for example, in battling, top speed isn't the biggest priority. It's helpful, but you much rather would need handling because there are a lot of tighter turns you need to turn around and get, and acceleration because you're going to be hit a lot more often there. Then, of course, in 200cc, it's very different racing in 200 versus 150. Handling is just so much more important in 200cc because there's so much less time to be able to react and turn just in time. So yeah, definitely look forward to those videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!